So everybody got it, right? Everybody signed both of these? Here? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the students in the back that just joined us. So glad to see you. My name is Kyle Brewer, and I'm so grateful to be with you today, this afternoon. Thank you for the ones that have stuck around after our training this morning. We have a special treat this afternoon. I'm going to hand over the mic pretty quickly, introduce us to the 2022 Arkansas Teacher of the Year, Jessica Somm. And she's going to share just a little bit about herself, her passion, her story. She's been someone that I've met through, we were at a conference together. We were both the speaker at a conference and at the dinner the night before, and happened to end up getting seated beside each other. And I don't believe that was by an accident, you know. And so we've just stayed in contact and tried to collaborate and work together any way that I can, or that we can. And so I'm thankful that she's with us today, and if you'll help me just give her a warm welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. I'm going to tell a little bit about my background and my journey, and then a little bit about my experience as the Arkansas Teacher of the Year, and something that I've really started to become more aware of and connect with this year. Part of it came after meeting Kyle. And so I'm the 2022 Arkansas Teacher of the Year. I teach in Cabot. But as part of being the Teacher of the Year, I have a year sabbatical from the classroom. So I actually have not been in the classroom this whole school year. I will go back. July 1st is when my time ends. So I'll have a little bit of a summer break. And then I'll go back to the classroom next year. I'm actually going to be helping our special education students who are in the general education classroom be taught better and to be included in that classroom. Part of my platform has been inclusive education and making sure those students who receive services are included as a meaningful part of a classroom community. But I want to give a little bit of my background and kind of how I got here, because it was a bit of a bumpy path. I went to college right out of high school. I'm originally from South Carolina. That's where my parents still are. And going to college was not an option. You went to college right after high school. And so I grew up in a great family. I had super supportive parents who were always really involved in my life. But I always bucked the system a little bit. And when I got to college, that was no exception. And so I kind of started going down a messy and a little bit of a dangerous path. I got in some trouble, and I dropped out of college before I could fail out. I'm lucky that God kind of knocked me on my butt after about a year, and I was forced to slow down a little bit and get my life together. I did not go right back to college. I actually went to a cosmetology school for skincare, and I did that for a few years. And then I met my husband, who is military, and we moved to Arkansas. And when we were here, he encouraged me to finish my college degree. And so I went through Arkansas State and BB to finish my degree, and I graduated college 10 years after I started. So it took me a little bit of a longer journey to get to that point. And that's just something I carry with me pretty much in my teaching and throughout life, that our journeys are not always straight and not always direct to where we're trying to get. And they're never over. There can be some rocky steps getting there. And as an educator, I look at that with the students that I teach. In teaching special education, my students come from a lot of times a difficult background. Obviously, there are students who are born maybe with Down syndrome or something that is genetic. But there's also students a lot of times who are a product of a difficult upbringing, and they could be getting services because maybe poor maternal care or drug or alcohol use during maternal care. And they come to our classrooms already struggling, already kind of behind because of those circumstances that are oftentimes out of their control. I've seen more and more students come to school struggling with mental health needs, struggling, possibly born with addiction, and they're still battling some of those problems as they enter school. And to see that in students at a young age, I teach at the elementary level, is really difficult. We know that those impacts are going to last for a long time. And so I'm already seeing more and more students come into our schools with those struggles at an earlier age. We're seeing that number grow, not with just children showing up with something identified, like I said before, maybe Down syndrome or another birth defect, but circumstances beyond their control. I've started really noticing more and more how these mental health issues are affecting our students, not just at our elementary age, but our high school, middle school students as well. I mentioned my husband's in the military. Our military-connected students are another group that at least 1 in 4 are having mental health struggles or behavioral struggles. Sometimes that's connected to inconsistent medical care. They may be moving every 12 to 18 months. Most of our military kids move 6 to 9 times in their life. Tomorrow, or Friday, is actually what we call Purple Up Day in Arkansas. April is month of the military child, so we help kind of acknowledge and celebrate our military kids, but really the focus should be talking about some of those struggles. If you're moving 6 to 9 times before you graduate high school, you're not going to have teachers or medical professionals who have been able to have eyes on you, to be able to know when you're struggling and maybe identify how to get you help, but because the time they recognize it, it might be time to move, maybe to another school, maybe to another state. Additionally, since COVID, our teachers have had a huge increase in mental health struggles. I'm just seeing more and more of this across the state, talking with teachers, talking with students, meeting with families that I've been able to do through this year as Arkansas Teacher of the Year. So I think one thing that's really important to me is just that we talk about these things, that we bring light to them, we address some of the struggles, we address what our students are facing and experiencing and are dealing with. Because when I graduated high school 20 years ago, yes, there was difficult things, yes, there was troubles, but I feel like now our kids are facing a whole new level of exposure and experiences that maybe some of us did not experience or understand. We know social media has changed some of that. We're seeing that being brought to light, and even how that is impacting our students' mental health needs across the state. So to me, I think it's just very important that we continue to discuss these issues. We bring light to these issues, whether it be our students, ourselves, again, some of these populations like our students who receive special education services and our military-connected students who may be at higher risk. Help identify who those students are, if they need help, and what we can do in their lives to help impact that. And I think oftentimes as teachers, we may be that person. I know we cannot always meet every child. We cannot be the point of contact for every single child that enters that school, but somebody in the school needs to be that person for every student. Every student needs that. So that is something that I have really worked on this year, is talking about joyful education and ensuring that teachers do connect with students and make sure that students know that they are safe so that they can continue to learn. So I'd love to tell you a little bit about my Teacher of the Year journey. I've talked about some of the stuff I've learned. I was named actually in October of 2021, but I didn't start until the following July. But through that time, I was able to go to Washington, D.C. to meet the President and the First Lady. I got to go to space camp for a week in the summer with the other state Teachers of the Year, and I was able to start advocating on behalf of students and teachers across Arkansas. And then throughout this year, I've been able to continue on that journey. And so I've actually been back to the White House two more times, which has just been incredible. I was able to go once and see artwork that I submitted from students that I had create ornaments, and they were displayed at the White House at Christmas. And again, being a special education teacher, I picked those students who received those services and made sure that their abilities were on full display for everyone to see. I've been able to meet with some of our state representatives, our governor, our senators, and talk about what is important in our state, talk about students and teachers, education, and what we need. And I think a lot of times we don't feel like our voices are heard. We might say, oh, well, we've contacted this person, or I'm frustrated with this isn't happening. But I've been able to see firsthand, even when people don't know their voices are being heard, people are listening. And so that's just really developed this advocacy spirit in me, that I feel like I'm obligated to speak out for teachers, for students, for people just in Arkansas who may have concerns or needs related to education, since that's the area that I feel most comfortable and most confident speaking about, and be that voice so that we can continue to have positive change across our state for everyone, but again, the work I'm doing specifically for students and teachers. I've also been able to have a non-voting seat on our State Board of Education, and that's been eye-opening as well, to be able to see who's making these decisions, why they're making them, and the background information that goes into them. And then to be a voice as an educator in that space has been really, really powerful. The best part, though, has just been going into schools, meeting students, meeting teachers, meeting people like Kyle at conferences and different places across the state that have helped me learn and become more aware of what I didn't know, where I need to continue to learn more, and the spaces that people are doing amazing things that maybe aren't necessarily being recognized and acknowledged. And so I love opportunities like this to come and learn alongside you guys, to hear stories, because our stories are powerful, and that's what guides our change in our work that we're doing. And so like I said, I will finish my year of service July 1st. but that doesn't mean I'm done working. I always get to be the Teacher of the Year for 2022, and I will always make sure I continue to use my voice and my advocacy to make sure we are doing what's right for students, teachers, and really everyone across Arkansas, so we can continue to grow as a state and do what's right for all of us. So if you guys had any questions about Teacher of the Year or anything, I'd be happy to answer them. I also don't want to take too much time from Kyle because his story is really powerful and you guys are going to really enjoy it.
My oldest daughter was a special needs child, so I have a special place in my heart for special ed teachers. I really do. But my question has to do more with, I think the LEARNS Act has been in the headlines a lot, and as somebody that sat down with legislators and leaders and educators, and your impressions, what do you like about the LEARNS Act? Do you have any concerns?
Absolutely. I think that is a huge topic right now in education, and it's difficult because it was 144 pages. It's a lot to read, it's a lot to understand. I've had a chance to sit in on some of the working groups and sit in on some of the discussions, and of course read the bill multiple times, hear some of the testimonies from different people. People are passionate about this, and the best part of it to me is that we're talking about education so much, because that is so important. As a special education teacher, I didn't feel like it was included in that bill, but I know we have federal laws that we kind of defer to, IDEA and ESSA, that really guide special education. But I want to make sure that we're not ignoring our students who receive special ed services, our English language learners, our families from poverty. And so I did feel like some ELL and SPED were a little bit left out of that. But there's a lot of good that's coming from this bill. And I know that they had over 1,300 people apply to be members of these working groups who are going to help with the rules and the implementation. And so right now, while I think teachers and a lot of people in the community, parents are really excited. Teachers are a little overwhelmed because it's a lot of change. And so while I think they're feeling that right now, we're going to see these work groups come together. We're going to see parents, superintendents, teachers, just community members lean in and say, we want to do the work because it needs to be done right if we're going to make all these changes. And so like the $50,000 teacher minimum pay, that's been a lot of people are thinking the minimum was $36,000. So your first year bachelor's degree, the minimum you could be paid by law was $36,000. That went up to $50,000. That's huge. That's life-changing money. But not every school district is able to provide the steps that were previously there. And that's frustrating for teachers because they say, well, I've worked for 15 years. They're in their first year, and they're going to make 50, and I'm going to make 52 this first year. So how is that fair? But nobody was even close to 50 before that. So kind of putting aside maybe some of the selfish feelings of like it's not fair that they're making this, but we're all making more, and trying to reset our minds on that, and knowing that every 2 years we have to go through adequacy. We have to really make sure we're spending the money right and that it's being spent on learning and on teachers. I think in the next 2 to 3 years, as they work through these rules and implementation, people are going to become more comfortable with it. There's a lot of changes in the first 90 days of having a new governor, having new people in session, that House session being fully in person in place in a long time, but there's a lot of good. I don't know if anybody saw in the news, Marble Lane School District. That's a perfect example of something we really didn't talk about before. They were going to be consolidated prior to LEARNS. This happened before the governor even was sat in January, and they had to be consolidated with another district. It was decided. LEARNS came in and allowed them to use what's called a transformation contract. The people in that community were begging at that state board meeting for LEARNS to be used so they didn't have to consolidate. So now a third-party entity can come in, whether it be a co-op or a charter organization or any community organization, and make sure that they are making changes so students are learning. That wasn't even possible 100 days ago. So I think there's going to be some struggles, like there always is with any kind of big change, but overall, the focus on education and students in our state is top-notch, and I think that's, for me, very encouraging because we have to do more for students. We have to have kids reading, we have to have teachers supported and treated like professionals, and we need families to be a part of that. That's the end of the day. Like, I cannot do this work alone, and I shouldn't. It's your child. I should be your partner to make sure the children are being successful. So, anybody else? Awesome. Okay, well, I'm so excited for you guys to hear from Kyle and hear his story. It is powerful, and you guys are just going to enjoy it. So welcome Kyle Brewer back.
Yeah, give it up for Jessica again. She did an amazing job. Thank you for all the work that you've done prior to becoming Teacher of the Year, the work that you've done while you held that position, and the work that you'll continue to do. And I'm grateful and honored to be able to partner with you and some of our advocacy work and things like this. So, you know, y'all, like I said earlier, this very thing is started at a dinner meeting, like, I don't know, several months ago.
September, I think, yeah.
And it's finally came to fruition. And this has nothing to do with my story, but I just think about the importance of relationships, and you just never know who you might be sitting beside at any given time, and to, you know, take advantage of the people that you meet as far as cultivating and developing those relationships and finding some common ground and how you can work together in a positive way. And so thank you, Jessica, for sharing your story and for sharing some about yourself. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to share my story. Earlier, I spent a lot of time just talking about Narcan training. This afternoon, I'm going to share my story, and I like to use pictures because, as they say, and I'm not sure who they is, but pictures worth 1,000 words, right? So there's some pictures in here you'll see that'll help better explain what I'm trying to communicate to you today. This is me today. July 10th of 2022, last year I celebrated 5 years in recovery. This year, make it to that point, it'll be 6 years in recovery. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Addiction Studies that I graduated from UCA in 2013 with. I am the Peer Support and Recovery Services Manager for DADAC, the Association for Addiction Professionals, which is a national addiction and mental health professional membership organization. And we do training and education and advocacy work around those issues. All 3 different levels of peer support certification and credentialing, including a peer support supervisor. I was the first peer recovery specialist in Arkansas to be employed and stationed in the emergency department. I'll talk more about what a peer recovery specialist is and what that actually means and looks like. I've had the honor to receive a couple different awards over the past couple of years through the work that I got to do with a lot of amazing people. And I just share you this because this is my life today. I'm so grateful for it. But this is not possible without literally thousands of people in a community coming behind me and supporting me and investing in me and believing in me and giving me a chance and giving me, you know, resources and opportunity to get to where I'm at today. Because 6 years ago, my life looked a lot different than it does today. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that story. Before I tell you my story, I'd like to talk about why we tell our stories and why I think it's important, not just for me or for Jessica, but for all of us. Each person in this room, you have a story. Your story is meaningful and it matters and it's important. And your story is so significant. The things that you've gone through is so important that it could actually be the key that unlocks someone else's chains out there. They're just waiting to hear you share that story, right? They just need to hear that you've gone through something, you're on the other side of it, and that can give them hope. And hope is a very powerful thing. And if we can, through sharing our stories and communicating with each other, give each other hope, it can really fuel positive, you know, change and outcomes. And breaking the stigma. These issues, mental health and substance use and addiction, there's such a strong stigma behind it where it's, you know, keep it, you know, behind closed doors, act like it doesn't exist, let's not talk about it type of mentality. When that gets us nowhere, that helps in no way, shape, or form. It only intensifies the problem. It only makes things worse. I say that while also understanding and relating to how that can happen, as I'll share in my story through me and my family. But the stigma. When we share our stories and we get up here, or when you one-on-one with someone, or, you know, the clerk at the gas station, or someone you're sitting inside the doctor's office waiting room, you share your story with them, you never know like how much impact that can have on them. But what you're doing is you're changing perceptions about those issues. Whatever those issues are, we've all had our journeys, we've all had our ups and our downs. And when you share that, you know, you've gone through that, and this is what helped you get through it, and this is where you're at today, it helps change not just individuals' minds about people and groups of people, but it can change society's minds about groups of people. So it's really important to help stop the stigma, because in reality, we have a really big problem, but there's also some solution too. There's over 23 million Americans in recovery today, so active, living a life of recovery from a substance use disorder. But we also know at the same time that in 2021 we lost over 100,000 people to a drug overdose related death. So the problem's real. So we need to talk about both. We need to celebrate recovery, and we need to highlight that, and we need to come together and talk like some of the things Jessica was talking about, the collaboration. And I think through storytelling, we all can resonate with stories. So I just encourage that right off the jump. Like, there's nothing special about me or Jessica. Like, we're just been given an opportunity. You have an opportunity every day to share your story as well. And so share it, whether that's in a platform like this or just talking to someone in your community. I encourage you to share your story as well, because it's meaningful and it matters. This is my grandmother over here on the left. Unfortunately, this is her graveyard. She passed away back in 2003 when I was I believe 12 years old at that time. I just turned 33 this year. So yeah, I was 13, and this was the fork of the road for me. So I grew up, kind of bounced around a lot. We moved a lot, not because of well, actually my dad is in the military, and I have a military background. But one of our main reasons for moving around was because of, my dad and my uncles, my grandpas, even my grandma, everybody just about, besides my mom, my little sister, has had their own battle with substance use or mental health, incarceration at some point. So there was a lot of inconsistency growing up until the 4th grade. We moved to Benton, Arkansas, and that's where my family decided to put roots down, and I stayed. So born in Memphis, Tennessee. But I gotta, off the jump, clarify that I'm a Razorback fan all day long. It's only my birth certificate that says Tennessee on it. But anyways, so at the age of 13, my grandmother passed away, and my grandma was like my best friend, and she was just obviously a mother figure in my life and someone I adored and loved spending time with. We would go garage selling together. We'd go, digging up worms under the leaves and go fishing together. We just anything that we were doing, as long as I was doing with Mama, I was okay, And she was an escape for me a lot of times from whatever was going on at home with my parents. I recognize, I didn't know that then, but I know that now, that her home and just her was a source of comfort for me. And when she passed away, I'd never experienced loss. I had never experienced, the loss of a loved one. So something significant like this, with grief and the anger and the sadness and the confusion and all the questions that come with something like that, were hitting me all at one time at 13 years old. And something I did know is that I'd watched time and time again growing up, family members and friends use drugs and alcohol to change the way that they feel. That they would use this substance, I'll visually see, and it would change the way that they feel. And so it was during this time that I started experimenting with alcohol for the first time. I was 13 years old. It was right soon after my grandmother passed away. And it wasn't anything crazy. It was just, every now and again we might get someone's older brother or sister to buy something from the store. It wasn't wild. It wasn't drinking every day. It just started with experimenting with alcohol. That quickly progressed within 2 years to trying getting high on over-the-counter prescription medications like there's triple C's, or I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there's these medications like Robitussin, and they can take a lot of them and make you hallucinate. So I started doing stuff like that, and then I started smoking marijuana. Marijuana, at the age of 15, is the first drug that I started using every day. So started with alcohol, quickly progressed to marijuana, and that came with a lot of different challenges, because not only was it the first drug that I experimented with, but it was the first drug that led to me being arrested for the first time. So quickly, after beginning to smoke marijuana every day, at the age of 16, I was arrested for a possession charge in Boxout, Arkansas. I had some marijuana on me. We were out there swimming, and I got into trouble with the police. And so that started painting this reputation for me. Benton's not a huge town. I mean, it's not it's not like a small town, but it's not a huge town, so most people know what's going on. I imagine around here, everybody knows everybody what's going on with everybody. You get arrested, they know about it, they know what charges you got, and so I started getting that reputation, you know, as the person you don't want your kids hanging around, the pothead, you know, and things like that. And so instead of recognizing that at that time and saying, you know, I'm not interested in that, I was lost and I didn't have any identity. I embraced that as my identity, and I leaned into that. I liked being that person, like the attention that it gave me. It made me feel cool, all these different things. And at the end of the day, I liked the way that the drugs and alcohol made me feel. I mean, that's just a fact. Well, so from 16 to 18, I stayed on juvenile probation. I caught a couple more additional charges and probation revocation for failing drug screens because I wouldn't stop using marijuana and stealing from my employer to try to support my habit, and we got a theft of property charge. So I ended up going to rehab for the first time, or a treatment program, at the age of 17, at a place called Horizon in Fort Smith. I went there for 75 days as an alternative sentence to going to what's called C-STEP, or it's like a boot camp for adolescents. The problem was that one thing that I had going for me is, like many of you in the room, students, you're showing up. You know, I would show up. I'd show up to school. And I always showed up for school. And until about the 10th or 11th grade, I was playing basketball. I was involved. And as that reputation started getting more and more, and I got kicked off the basketball team, you know, my extracurricular activities switched up. But no matter what, I kept showing up to school. And I ended up graduating. And what helped me at this point in time at 17 to stay out of this boot camp was, if I went to that boot camp, I would have missed the first 4 weeks of my senior year, and would have failed my senior year. They didn't want to set me behind. And so my family advocated for me. The judge allowed me to go to treatment for drug and alcohol use. And so that was my first exposure to treatment. And when I came back, I didn't listen to most of what they said. I was not interested in what they had to say. I was 17, and I'll just be honest with you, I just didn't think that I had a problem or that these issues were something that I needed to be concerned about. But one thing I did listen to, one thing I do want to highlight, was that the people that you surround yourself with matter. Like, regardless of what you do, if you surround yourself with people that are doing certain things or going certain places, you may not do it immediately, but eventually you're going to find yourself doing the very same things that you surround yourself with. So I changed up my friends. I changed up my friend group when I came back from that treatment program, and started hanging out with some friends that I used to hang out with before I got really involved with drugs. And graduated high school there in 2008. That's a picture of me, several of my buddies. Benton Panthers graduate, and they let me off probation because I turned 18, and they couldn't keep me on juvenile probation any longer. So I get let off probation. I also find out during this time, this is always my fun fact that I share, you know, whether it's in a class or someone's like, you know, what's your fun fact about you that no one will guess, is that I'm a registered Native American with the Oneida Nation. So I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Native American. And I found this out during this time because I don't come from like a family of wealth or anything like that. We don't have a ton of money. So like paying for college was going to be pretty difficult and challenging. And so my family found out by us becoming registered with the reservation, we would qualify for scholarships. And so I ended up going off to UCA with a scholarship from the Oneida Nation and started my freshman year in 2008. So I kind of went to college with a fresh slate. I was let off probation. I no longer had that probation supervision over my head. I'm away from my parents. I got my driver's license back that I hadn't had for a year. The tribe had given me $3,000 after I turned 18. It's a part of the deal that they do. I'm in a new town, and it was just really a perfect storm for some not so good things to start taking shape. So I went off to UCA, and I loved it. If college is in your interest whatsoever, It does not have to be a part of everybody's story, but I absolutely am so grateful that I went to college. And so if you're interested in it at all, or or like you were talking about earlier, like going back to college, I would encourage you to do that, because I love my college experience. And from the outside looking in, college, it looked like I was just having this perfect life and, having a great time. My grandmother passing away, and then this second event happened, were two pivotal moments in my life. And the second event was that my freshman year of college, I got my wisdom teeth removed. And they wrote me a prescription of opiates for the pain, of oxycodone, and these other drugs like hydrocodone, morphine, things like that. And they wrote me this prescription, and I remember taking this pill, and I remember mixing it with alcohol, and I remember really liking the way that it made me feel, the euphoria that it gave me, the confidence it gave me, the ability to just talk to anybody, and just the fun that I had. And I kept taking them, and this was back in 2008, before we made a lot of progress that we've made today as far as monitoring these types of things. But I called for 2 months afterwards and told them that I had dry socket, that my teeth were still hurting, and they called me in two refills. And so after that second refill, I'd say that I was at that point of opioid dependence, where I didn't realize it or recognize it at the time, but I loved the way that it made me feel so much that I began seeking it out and buying them from friends, from people that I went to school with, from anybody that I could find that had a prescription for this medication. And so this is progressing from 2008 to 2013 in college. Opioid use, goes from getting a prescription for my wisdom teeth to snorting 30 milligram oxycodones to not being able to wake up and function without taking a medication. All while this is going on. So on the surface, it looks like I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. This right here is something that my parents would receive just about every semester. Besides one semester, I either made the Dean's or the President's list, meaning I made a 3.5 or 4.0 GPA. I was the vice president of my fraternity. I was the president of the All Greek Council, another organization on campus. We did lots of great things, donating to the Boys and Girls Club of Faulkner County, cleaning up after the Valonia tornado, if y'all remember that. We were in the community. It looked like I was doing not just what I was supposed to be doing, but I was doing it at a high level, and I was going on all the trips, and I had all the friends and all these things. But behind that, underneath that, there was a really different story being written. And that's the true story. Right here is the day I graduated college. And you see in the middle, you got one of my little sisters right here, my dad, me, my mom, another one of my little sisters. And then you got me. And you see me smiling, and I'm graduating college. I hadn't mentioned this, but I'm the first person in my family to attend and to graduate from a four-year university. So you would think that this day would be a day that I look back on, and the type of feelings and memories I would have would be positive and celebration, and a day where we got together and recognized all the hard work that it took as a family to get to where we were at. But that's not what I remember about that day. What I remember about that day is just a few hours before this smile, I had woke up in the morning and I had used all my pills the night before. Because at this point, this is no longer about the fun I was having. It was no longer about, partying and going out and all that stuff. Even though I was still involved in doing those things, I could not function day to day without this medication. So I would get physically sick. If you were here this morning in the train, those withdrawal symptoms, the sweats and the feeling cold, and the upset stomach, and the vomiting, and the diarrhea, and just all the worst cases of flu you can imagine, I was experiencing if I would not have this medication. So I couldn't do anything. And so my life became this timer, this clock in my head of using something and doing any and everything I can before that timer hit zero and those withdrawal symptoms started to prevent those, for that sickness from happening. So it was less about having fun and more about just staying normal and staying well and not being sick. And that's where I was at this point in time. And so I woke up that morning and I was panicking because I had used everything and I knew my family was coming into town. I had to, get my act together and put on this front and act like, I got everything in control, even though they knew at this point in time, my mom had known. They had found out my senior year when I had spent, like $6,000 in 3 months. They realized something was going on. But they enabled me because they believed if I got a degree and I got a piece of paper that somehow, some way that was going to make me grow up, get a job, and then this problem wouldn't be an issue any longer. That's what my mom told herself to continue to enable me through the senior year of college. And so that's what got me to this day. I barely made it through, but I did. And the irony of it all is that degree that I picked up is actually a Bachelor's of Science in Addiction Studies. So while everything that I just described was going on in my personal life, what I watched all growing up happen to my family, that I've been learning about for the past 4 years in college classrooms about the disease of addiction, about these drugs, and about how they affect the brain and the body and what happens when you abuse them. I had convinced myself, I lived in so much pride, and I was, just to be frank with you, so entitled and full of pride that none of that information applied to me, that I was a special exception to all of that. And so I had convinced myself that I thought I was fooling you, fooling my parents, my professors. The only person I was really fooling is myself. It's because that's a lie. Addiction does not discriminate. Addiction does not care how much education you have, how much money you have. It does not matter what neighborhood you grew up in. It does not matter who your parents are. It doesn't matter what political party you affiliate yourself with. None of that stuff matters. Socioeconomic status, none of that matters. It affects everybody, and it does affect everybody, and it has affected just about every person in our communities have been touched by the opioid epidemic in some way. And so I had to learn the very hard way how this would go on to destroy my life, because the scholarship money, the fraternity, and the grades, the schoolwork, these are the three pillars that were kind of helping me keep this whole thing going for so long. Because as long as I was making good grades, my family could convince themselves that everything was okay. Everybody else, nobody questioned it. On high school, college, things are acceptable as far as drinking and using drugs. Like, nobody's really questioning what's going on. I had all the friends, so I had a lot of a friend group, and a lot of different people I was surrounded by. So I never, had to deal with strained relationships. And then the scholarship money, which is what funded my habit. That's how I got through. Well, when I graduated, all three of those things were suddenly gone, and they were no longer there. And so the real story and what had been going on for the last 5 years started rising to the surface really, really fast. And so from 2013 to 2017 is when these photos were taken. And for a variety of reasons, anything from theft of property, from stealing to support my habit, to a DWI from drinking while driving, things like that I was getting arrested for, because I didn't go out and get in the workforce and start using my degree. I was faced with the reality that now I didn't have the money, I didn't have the friends, I didn't have the academics to keep it going, that now I had to survive. Because what I did have was a multi-$100 a day pill addiction that had, reached the point of I was snorting hundreds of dollars worth of oxycodone a day and spending as much money as I could get on them. And, I thank God that this wasn't today, because chances are I wouldn't be alive to be sharing my story with you today, because today you don't know what's in the pill that you may take or in the pill that you may snort, even though the bottle or the person or the friend may say that it's a oxycodone or an Adderall or Xanax or whatever. fentanyl and other types of drugs like fentanyl are being cut into these prescription medications where just one pill, one line, and you can die. And so thankfully I got into recovery in 2017, right when that started really coming into Arkansas strong. But I just want to bring that up because today's a whole different world. Back then I never questioned really if I was getting a Roxy, which was an 30 milligram oxycodone, little blue pills that you might have seen on the internet, or you've seen in the news, or you might have seen in your friend's pocket. I know I certainly did. And so just that is what took over my life, but I never questioned what I was getting. Today you have to be so careful because you just never know what it is that you're taking, what you might be getting. And these are some of the consequences that happened in my life. Not just the arrest, but the strained relationships, the pride that I was living in, the mask I was wearing, the stigma that I dealt with my family. We stayed in silence about it for many years because my mom was afraid of what her coworkers would think about the situation if we were honest about it, if I got help. And I certainly was in huge denial about the situation and didn't believe that I had a problem. And so, I wouldn't come to terms with accepting it. I just want to say that the first step to any, moving forward or resolving any problem is to admit that the problem exists. And so acceptance and admission of the problem, that was not there for me. But my family also was in that state until my mom found a group called Al-Anon. I always like to highlight this group and just groups like it, because what Al-Anon is it's for a family member or a friend of someone that is having issues with addiction, and for them to go and get their own support. And my mom found a group there in our hometown and got the support she needed and learned about enabling and how she was actually a part of the problem, and that she was loving me to death, and that she was contributing to my issues. And I remember it like it was yesterday when she started attending these meetings. I didn't know she started attending these meetings, but she changed. And she set some hard boundaries with me, and our conversations changed. I wasn't allowed to be on my parents' property. I was not allowed to come home for Christmas. I was not allowed to call to get bailed out of jail. They were not going to bring me any money. They were not going to believe my stories about not eating. It was if you're not ready to say, hey, you got a problem and you want to get help, then there's really no conversation to be had. Now I know that may sound rough, and I know today that was the hardest thing my mom's ever done in her life. And I always like to say that, whether she's in the room or not, that I'm so grateful that she did that, because if she wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't be here. Like, that was just as important a part of the process than anything, was my mom getting that help, because she was the one who was enabling me. She was the one who was sneaking behind my dad's back and giving me money and trying to keep things going for me, and trying to keep me from hitting that rock bottom. And so love looks different in different seasons of life. And so if you find yourself, making some bad decisions, or you find yourself in some challenging situations, and your friends or your family might respond in a way that you're not understanding, I can relate to that, because I certainly didn't understand it at the time, but I know today how important that was. I know today how important my mom finding that group and that support was for her. So if you have a friend or a family member that's struggling and you are a part of that in any way and need support, I encourage you to find a group like this and get support yourself as well. And so I went to, as you saw, I went to jail multiple times. I went to treatment a couple more times throughout this process. I moved from just snorting pills to I got introduced to using a needle and injecting pills. And then one day I got introduced to heroin and learned that heroin is essentially the exact same thing as these pills, and it was cheaper. And so I started buying heroin and started shooting heroin up. I grew up thinking, with this list of things that, like, I might push the limits to this point, but I'll never, ever do these things. And I'll be the first one to tell you that heroin and using a needle were at the top of the list. And some other things that I ended up doing in my addiction were at the top of that list. By the time it was all said and done, I did everything that was on that list. I became a person that was unrecognizable. Became someone I never thought I would become, doing things I never thought I would do, finding my places and situations and hanging out with people that I never would have thought I would find myself. But that's just where this disease took me. It took me there, that drive to not want to be sick. It took me to wherever I had to go, whatever I had to do by any means necessary. So on July 10th of 2017, which is my recovery birthday, this was not a day that looked like anything positive was going to begin that day. So if you asked me or anybody that saw me that day, like, hey, is this the start of anything good? They would have probably told you that you were out of your mind and that you need to go to the hospital, because I was in a drug-induced psychosis. I had been using methamphetamines and heroin in a hotel room for multiple days, because at this point I was homeless. I had nowhere to go. I was just manipulating people and trying to just survive in any way that I can. And I was using the meth to try to curb the withdrawal symptoms that I would experience from not having heroin or pills. And so I got myself in this state of fear and psychosis, and I was hallucinating. And one of my uncles that I mentioned earlier, that a lot of my family members have battled addiction, well, one of my uncles had gotten released from prison a couple of years prior to this, and he had gotten to a local church and gotten to a local recovery program called Celebrate Recovery, and he was doing well, and he was in recovery, and he saw this as an opportunity. This is when God started working in my life before I even recognized what was happening, because this day I was not calling anybody asking for help or admitting that I had a problem or that I needed help. What I was calling was saying that there were police after me, that I had committed some very serious crimes, that there were different people out to get me, and I was scared for my life. That's what I was calling and saying. But my uncle, he saw it as an opportunity, that the state of mind I was in would enable him to come pick me up and drop me off somewhere without me really knowing what was going on. And so that's what he did. So he picked me up from this hotel room in Benton, Arkansas, and he dropped me off in a homeless shelter in Little Rock. It's called the Union Rescue Mission, or the Nehemiah House. You might have also heard of the Dorcas houses they have for women there in Little Rock. And they had the homeless shelter at the time, and I checked into that homeless shelter on a Sunday night, all because of a relationship that my uncle had with the church and the church had with the mission. And I didn't make it there very long, because shortly after the staff came in, that few hours later, they called an ambulance because of the state of mind I was in, that I was not in a good place. I was at risk of hurting myself or someone else. And the ambulance took me to Baptist, where I eventually, after being tackled, restrained, sedated, and all of that fun stuff, I would make it to detox. I'd make it to the psychiatric floor, where I was staying for, I believe I was there for 4 days. And in that 4 days, my family came and visited me. But I want to also say that because my family had set those boundaries with me, that they never gave up on me. They never stopped praying for me. They never stopped. If I was to call and ask for real help and I was serious, it's not like they wouldn't be there. But they came and visited me and basically laid the option out there. It was, when you discharge from this hospital, these are the two options you have. Your uncle will come and pick you up if you will go right back to the Nehemiah House and talk to them and join their 9-month recovery program. Because they also, in addition to the homeless shelter, had a 9-month faith-based recovery program. Or, if you don't want that option, then nobody will be here when you discharge, and you will continue to be on the street like you've been, and you can go and continue going and doing about what you've been doing. And I'll be the first person to tell you that I didn't have a moment of clarity. I didn't have this huge desire to change at this point in time. It was simply my circumstances at that point in time, and the way I physically and mentally felt, because I was exhausted, because I had been on one for a while, that I just didn't have it in me to go back on the street. So I took the ride back to the Nehemiah House to join their 9-month recovery program. And I hated it. I hated being there and everything. I didn't think I needed to be there at all, especially for 9 months. I was 27 at that time, and 9 months to me, I thought was eternity. In reality, just say that is just a drop in the bucket compared to the bigger picture and the scheme of things in life, that 9 months is not that long of a time. But I struggled with that concept. And so after about 6 weeks of fighting and going back and forth with myself and just the staff, and now I know God, I was just really wrestling with the process. I made the most important decision in my life, and I surrendered to Jesus Christ. And now my pathway to recovery is through a faith-based recovery program. That's what led me to where I'm at today. That's what I practice today, in addition to recovery meetings and programs. There are multiple pathways to recovery, a lot of different options and ways to get there. Mine happened to be this way. And when I made that decision to surrender my life to God and say, look, I'm going to give my energy, my time, my attention, the same amount of dedication and determination that I put into my addiction, and I'm going to put it towards this, and I'm going to put it towards my recovery, I'm going to put it towards my faith, I'm going to put it towards something positive. You know, even if this doesn't really relate with you, like, think about it with anything. Just take a positive goal in your life and say, I'm going to put the same type of energy I've been putting into this negative area of my life, and I'm putting into this positive. And I said, I'm going to make a deal that at the end of 9 months, after I actually give this a good, a legitimate attempt, worst case scenario is my life would be a little bit better than it was right then, because my life was in bad shape at that point in time. What I would come to find out is that by making the decision to surrender my life to God and to commit to that program of recovery, I started changing. It didn't happen overnight. I had someone ask me earlier, like, how long did it take you to recover? It's not like that for me. It's a process. It wasn't 9 months and I was done. It was in that program I learned some principles, one of them being with my purpose in life, to love God and love people. And that looks different ways, in different settings, and can manifest itself in a variety of different places. But just, it was something bigger than myself that I was supposed to be living for, and I was supposed to be doing something different. That I might have not knew exactly what I was supposed to do with my life, but I knew what I had been doing was not it. And so I found my purpose. I also learned that recovery is a lifestyle. So it wasn't, I did 9 months, because I did do the 9-month program, and I graduated in April 2018. That was the first time I ever shared my story, was at graduation day. That wasn't the end. That was not the finish line, right? In a lot of ways, that was the beginning of a lot of things, because now I was no longer going to be in a structured program, because I was at that point in time in a really protective, structured, inpatient, positive environment that was conducive to my recovery and treatment. But what I realized is that recovery is a lifestyle, and for me, this list here offers just a few things of what that lifestyle looks like. And it's not about this is the recipe for success, that your lifestyle may look different than mine. It's just about finding what it is that works for you, like what it is that you connect with, what it is that helps you find, direction, purpose, hope, meaning, and, the strength to move forward. This is what it looked like for me, and just a couple of them to highlight is serving others in my community. I was so selfish. I didn't know it, didn't recognize it, and I certainly wouldn't tell you, but I was so selfish and self-centered. Everything was about me, 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 and primarily because I didn't have time to worry about anybody else, because I was always worried about not being sick. So I didn't have time to be, worrying about what this family member's doing, or this family member's doing, or this friend's doing, or this baby that they're having, or this marriage and wedding that's taking place. I didn't have time. I missed so many things. Even if I happened to be there physically, mentally I was not there, because mentally I was obsessing. Like we talked about in the training, that obsession of just thinking about the drug and how I'm going to get it, what my next move is all the time. So serving others in my community is a huge thing. Being honest, open-minded, and willing. Accepting correction and suggestion from others. That is big lifestyle change for me. You couldn't tell me anything From the time I was, 15 to the time I was 27, there was no anybody, I don't care who they are, how many letters they got behind their name, or what their story is, you couldn't tell me anything. I didn't listen to them. I didn't relate to them. They didn't know who I was, and I wasn't going to hear any of the information they were sharing with me. And so when I became open-minded to listening to what other people were saying, what my family had been saying, really most importantly, what like the directors of this program were saying to me, because these were men that had also gone through the program themselves that I could relate with on that level, I started changing. I just want to highlight this again. This is a process that I've gone through and I'm continuing to go through, and that these are just some of the things that are involved in that lifestyle. And it may look different for you or another loved one that's in recovery. But in that lifestyle, and after completing that program, I learned about peer support or a peer recovery specialist. And I want to just tell you a little bit about what that is. A peer support specialist is a person who provides peer support services based on shared understanding, lived experience, respect, and mutual empowerment. Basically, it's an individual that brings the lived experience of being in recovery and living a life of addiction or mental health challenges, combining that with training and supervision to assist others in initiating and maintaining recovery, which helps to enhance the quality of personal and family life and long-term recovery. So it's basically that concept of, I've been where you're at, I understand what you're going through. The state in 2018 had developed the training. This is done all over the country and internationally. This peer support and recovery coaching, Arkansas was getting involved with it at this point in time, and I learned about it right around the time I had completed the Nehemiah House and I'd made my transition to working at a local church and just a role there and going to school. And I learned about it, and I had no intention of it being a career or being something I did for a living. I just thought it sounded like a good resource to have and something that would be good to put in my tool belt and to have in my toolkit to help others. Because again, like I said, serving others and serving my community was a part of that lifestyle that I learned at the Nehemiah House and through recovery. And so I went through the training and learned about peer support. It varies from state to state as far as there's a criteria. This is a legitimate profession. There's a credential and certification process with training, scope of practice, and code of ethics. You have to be in recovery for a certain amount of time, depending on what state it is. Arkansas is 2 years in recovery. The 4 pillars of peer support that I like to talk about are lived experience. So our life experiences that we've gone through, the good, the bad, the ugly, are valuable. They are very valuable. They are valuable to us, but they can also be very valuable to others who are going through the same thing. And when we have mutual and shared lived experiences, that makes a connection between you and I, that we can relate to one another on a different level. And that connection, that creates community. And in recovery, in life in general, none of us want to do life alone, right? Especially today, we're all plugged in and connected on, on social media. We're always connected to somebody. So we're always searching and looking for community. And so finding that community through that connection is so important. And then finally, empowerment. The disease of addiction and dealing with mental health challenges is very disempowering. If you've never gone through it yourself, it's one of the things you might not realize at the time, but a lot of our systems of care, even though we've made progress in areas, and a lot of our, different like criminal justice system, it's set up to disempower individuals that are having these issues and take power away from you and take decisions away from you. And so peer support is all about empowering people to start making their own choices again, start making better choices, and support them in that process. And so I went through the trainings. I went through multiple levels of training between 2019 and 2020, the core, the advanced, and the supervisor. And then I became the first peer recovery specialist to work in the state in an emergency department.
Emergency rooms across the country are seeing a rise in patients coming in because of drug overdoses. Instead of just treating and releasing them, UAMS is taking a different approach, one the hospital says is saving lives.
I'm so out of my league when it comes to the medical stuff.
29-year-old Kyle Brewer never thought he would find himself working in the emergency department of a hospital. But 3 months ago, he started at UAMS in Little Rock in a new role, helping people battling substance abuse.
They want help, they don't really know what they need to do.
As a peer support specialist, Brewer meets one-on-one with people who come into the emergency department because of an overdose, fentanyl poisoning, or withdrawals. Right from their bedside, he provides them with resources and opportunities to seek treatment.
We'll just talk. We'll talk about the situation. We'll talk about what's going on in their life. We'll talk about what they want to do, what their next step looks like for them.
For Brewer, it's personal. Not too long ago, it was him lying in a bed in the ER.
My drug of choice was opioids, and I like a lot of people in the state that it's happening, I got on the prescription medications, and I eventually ended up on heroin.
2.5 years ago, Brewer sought treatment for his addiction and is now living a life of recovery. Earlier this year, he became certified as a peer support specialist, the first to be employed by a hospital in the state.
It can be difficult for patients to talk about this sort of thing, and he makes it very easy and very comfortable for them to start discussing it, and that's a very important first step.
Everyone is thankful that I'm there. Not everyone is ready to change.
Still, Brewer says he has the opportunity to plant a seed and give them something he wished had been offered to him.
Well, it would certainly have given me hope. And that's what I intend to do is, if nothing else, just give individuals hope that I've been in that similar situation that you're in, but you don't have to stay in that situation.
This is such an incredible program that we're starting in Arkansas for UAMS.
Another part of the program was we would give out Narcan we just talked about. So if someone would come in, I'm going to skip through some of this information. It's not as relevant, but just about the importance of peer support in the medical setting for the sake of time. But the Narcan, I would, in addition to going around to the different rooms and offering support and resources, whatever that looked like, it could be as simple as having my number to call me later, or like, let's start the process of getting accepted into a treatment center or detox right now, and ensuring that they are, transferred straight from the hospital to the treatment center. Because in between there's a lot that can happen, so having a good plan in place before leaving the hospital is a really good approach. But one thing that we would also offer, in addition to my contact information later on, was we would give people a box with 2 doses of the nasal spray Narcan and educate them on what it was and how to use it. So even if they didn't want resources, or even if they may not have been having those challenges themselves at the time, they would leave with some resources and Narcan that could potentially save someone's life. And using this type of approach in hospitals and jails and really any setting is very shown to be very effective. A lot of research done in this on this topic, and my experience at UAMS kind of showed that myself, because there was no template for me. I didn't have anything to follow from the state of like what this looked like, so I just had to figure it out. And within the first 6 months, things caught on, and just a great team of people, social work, care management, resident physician, attending physicians, social workers, registered nurses, patient care techs. I mean, so many people that work in a hospital that work together collaboratively to try to provide the best care to the individuals that come in. Once that clicked and everybody understand what was happening, what my role was, it was a really powerful thing. And I want to talk about this quote right here from this resident. I didn't know what a resident was prior to working at UAMS, but a resident basically is like a doctorate in their last year of school, and it's like their internship or their practicum. They're paid, but it's their last year before going into completing medical school and then going off to practice medicine wherever they choose to practice that. So UAMS is a teaching hospital, so we have lots of residents, and this resident sent me this message, and I want to share it with y'all. Because I have to say, mainly because I don't want to forget before I finish residency, knowing you and seeing the incredible things you've done with your life taught me an incredible amount that will change the way I practice for the rest of my career. I can honestly say I was a little closed-minded about addiction and didn't put much thought into what I might be able to do for someone that might change their situation. Hearing your story and knowing you has given me a completely different outlook. I share that because it has nothing to do with me. It's about relationship. And it's about the significance and power of a relationship. By a resident physician, a doctor, medical professional, having a working relationship with someone in recovery, it completely changed the way that they're going to approach medicine and addiction and mental health for the rest of their career. So I just say that to say that if you don't know someone that's had these issues, you know, I'm sure we all do. If you don't know someone in recovery, I would encourage you to get to know someone, you know, and make some friends and connections and build those relationships and cultivate those, because that's how we really change things at the relationship level, I believe. And I saw that take place in real time at the hospital. I'll skip over this stuff. It's about naloxone. I've been able to obtain different levels of certification and credentialing, as I said. What I thought was just a training that I was going to 3 months later, a door open at the hospital. And it's ever since then I've been in this field, and this has been what I've been involved in. And I've continued to progress, whether that be professionally or personally, and been given many different opportunities to speak in a variety of different settings, to share my story, to do Narcan trainings like this morning, go inside of the same jails that I used to go inside as an inmate meet incredible people and build incredible relationships like with Jessica and other people that are doing amazing work. God's given me so many different opportunities, and I've been able to participate and be a part of and recognize in a variety of different settings and awards or whatever you want to call it. But none of this is possible, again, without the army of people that have invested in me, that have poured into my life, that have helped me get to where I'm at today, and that continue to help me get there and continue to help me to move forward each and every day. It may be me standing up here, but without God and that army of people, that community of people, those community resources, that I wouldn't have made it. It really, truly does take a village, and it takes an army. And so I want to just encourage you to be a part of that army, you know, and be a part of helping others versus maybe the problem of stigmatizing others and recognizing that this issue and these problems, they apply and affect each and every one of us. And a real simple way to do that is by changing our language. Instead of using words like addict or druggie or junkie or abuser, you can say the person with a substance use disorder or a person in recovery. Instead of saying a drug habit, you can call it what it is and call it a disease. Instead of an ex-addict, it's a person living in recovery. Instead of a relapse, they had a setback. Using words like dirty and clean have strong, you know, connotations connected to them. So just staying away from those words and using things like maintaining recovery or having a positive drug screen. Just the way we talk about issues can change a lot. And the fact that we're talking about it is a big deal in and of itself. But just some information, and I want to share this because I know we have some students in the back that weren't here when I told you about it earlier. This is a law in the state of Arkansas. If you or someone you know is experiencing an overdose, there is a law in place that protects you from getting in trouble by the police, by you getting them medical attention and getting them medical help. So if you take someone or you take yourself to the hospital that's experiencing an overdose, they're at a party or whatever the case may be, you will not get charged with possession of any type of drugs or alcohol. This law is in place to protect you from that. So no matter what the case or scenario is, if there's a friend, you see someone that's passed out at a party or they're not looking right and they're not responding and you think they might have taken something, it's okay to take them to the hospital. It's okay to call 911. You and the people there won't get in trouble for the alcohol that may be present or the drugs that may be present. This is a state law, and it's called the Joshua Ashley Polly Act. That's named after a college student that passed away because his friends didn't do that, and they left him there, and he ended up passing away. And these are other resources that I talked about earlier. This is an app. I know many of us have our phones with us today. The Narcan app. I encourage those of us in the room to download this app and check out the resources that are available. I want to skip to this picture right here because I believe for a long time that recovery or, like doing something that didn't involve drinking or, doing drugs, like I thought that would be dull or lame or wouldn't be something I'd be interested in, and it would take all the fun out of my life and I wouldn't have any more, trips and, social stuff. That was such a lie. I've learned that was such a lie that I had just associated everything in my life with drinking or using drugs. I could still get to do a lot of the things I went and got to do when I was in the middle of my addiction. I just don't do them under the influence of drugs and alcohol anymore. And you know what? They are meaningful memories that I'm fully present for, and they're new memories that I've gotten to experience, like skydiving, storming the field when Arkansas beat Texas a couple years ago, going to New York, just a variety of different things. So just want to speak to the lie that if you believe in the room that your life has to consist of using alcohol or drugs to have fun, that is not true. You can have just as much fun, just as much adventure, and just as much, spontaneous, good times without using drugs and alcohol. I know it to be true because I've experienced it in my life. I know we're right here at the end of time. I don't know if there's any questions, but I do want to put, that's just going to be in mind, put your email up there. That's our contact information. I have cards up here. Whatever the case may be, if it's you, a family member, if you need help, if you need resources, if you need to know more about any of the things that we talked about today, you can always reach out. I'll conclude with, again, reemphasizing for the last time that by no means am I able to be in recovery or get to this place on my own. It's taken so many different people believing in me and giving me an opportunity, and in my relationship with God, or it wouldn't be possible today. So I appreciate your time and your attention today, this afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to Beverly and to the university. Are there any questions? I think we would have to leave by 3, but do you have a question?
Do you know if the Good Samaritan law exists in other states, or is it just an Arkansas thing?
There are forms of the law that exist in other states, yes. It's not called the same thing, or it may be called the same thing, but it's definitely not called the Joshua Polly Act. But yeah, there are some forms, and then there are states where it doesn't exist at all.
My nephew was actually dropped off at an ER by another person because they were afraid that they would go to jail.
Yeah.
He was unconscious, and they just threw him out and left. But at least they got him there.
Yeah. I mean, getting someone to medical care is what's most important, and knowing that you're protected. With that, I know we've ran a little over time. Thank you so much, especially for everybody in this group that stuck around all morning and this afternoon. Jessica and I really appreciate it, and we're grateful to have been here today and thankful for all that you do and will continue to do in your communities. So.